What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in this video I'm going to be going through my Week 6 quarterback start sits. So talking about every single starting quarterback, listing them as either a start, fringe option, or a sit. The starts are the players you feel very confident throwing into your lineup this week. Fringe options, these are going to be more of like your weekly back-end QB1s, your higher-end QB2s. We've got, some injuries. Anthony Richardson missing some time. Jordan Love is someone who's on bye that had kind of become startable over the past few weeks, so maybe you need a guy off of waivers to slide in here. There could be a couple here that qualify as fringe options. If you guys enjoy the video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and then obviously sits. Those are going to be players you prefer to keep on your bench. But let's just dive right into the Thursday night matchup. We have the Broncos taking on the Chiefs, and for Russell Wilson here, it hasn't been pretty, but he just continues to put up solid fantasy production. So I'm going to have him as a fringe option, probably like a fringe QB1 at this point. Like I said, it hasn't looked pretty. There's been some rough patches with this offense, but if you've been starting him, the fantasy points have ended up getting into your lineup at some point. So he will be a fringe play for me. Then for the Chiefs, you continue to fire up Patrick Mahomes as a nice QB1. Moving over to Sunday, we have the Ravens taking on the Titans. And I feel like at this point, probably everyone has seen like the montage of the Ravens dropping like every single pass Lamar Jackson threw. Truly one of like the worst performances I've seen from a supporting cast maybe in like my entire life. Different places like are going to count drops differently. Like there's going to be a different criteria for them. But I was seeing like 7, 8, 9 drops on different places, and not just like meaningless drops. 2 drop touchdowns, Rashad Bateman, Mark Andrews. There were at least 2 drop deep passes, like perfectly placed from Lamar Jackson. I think one was to Devin Duvernay. I think the other one was to Rashad Bateman. And then also just like some chunk gains to like Zay Flowers that were dropped. Flowers also fell on a deep pass. So just an overall terrible performance from the weapons for the Ravens. Lamar Jackson continues to ball out. Even though he had a down fantasy game, really was not on him. You fire him up here as a start like you've been doing. For the Titans, we finally got some support from Ryan Tannehill to DeAndre Hopkins, but definitely not someone I actually want to be starting in my fantasy lineup. Moving over to the Commanders-Falcons matchup, I think Sam Howell is a decent fringe play, someone who could definitely slot in for like an Anthony Richardson or Jordan Love. He's been decent in like 4 out of the 5 games. He just had that one really bad game going up against the Bills. Falcons, not a cake matchup, but not like a killer either. So I do think he qualifies in that QB2 territory. For the Falcons, Desmond Ridder coming off the best game of his season. Definitely not someone I want to start for fantasy, but hopefully he's just able to support the other positions moving forward. Shifting over to the Vikings Bears matchup, I have both of these quarterbacks listed as starts. The Bears have allowed the most fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. Kirk Cousins has been solid. I really think Cousins is a start with or without Justin Jefferson in the lineup. Obviously, you'd prefer Jefferson in there, but going up against this Bears defense, I think he'd be a start even with Addison and KJ Osborne. You still have Hockenson there, so he's going to be a start. Then for the Bears, Justin Fields, after a rough 3 weeks to start off the season, he's been a monster over the last 2 games. Went from people calling him one of the worst passers in the league to now being second in passing touchdowns. So things really flipped here. Not a tough matchup here against the Vikings, so I like Justin Fields as a very strong play this week. Then we're going to have the Seahawks going up against the Bengals. And for the Seahawks, Geno Smith has definitely been underwhelming to start off the season. I still think he's someone who's like a weekly high-end QB2, but definitely hasn't been as impressive as he was last season. Then for the Bengals, I mean, it looked like Joe Burrow might have just been done. We didn't know if he'd ever get healthy from that calf injury. And I think I talked about this in one of the other starts of videos, but I don't really understand how he went from like completely immobile, not being able to do anything for the first like 4 weeks of the season, but then he comes out in week 5 here and is like good as new. Like I don't know how that played out, but I'll take it for sure. Good to see him back. I have him as a start option. I get it if you're a little weary and want to have him as a fringe play. I think it makes sense. But a healthy Joe Burrow is a start, and it looks like he's back to healthy, so that's where I'm going to have him this week. Moving over to the 49ers-Browns matchup, this is honestly going to be a tough matchup for both these quarterbacks. Brock Purdy has been great through 5 weeks. I do just think he's more of a fringe option, back-end QB1 due to the matchup. I mean, prior to Lamar Jackson, no one had been able to do anything against this Browns defense. And then for the Browns, Deshaun Watson has been decent for fantasy, but he runs up against a really tough 49ers defense. So I think both these guys kind of get docked just based on the matchup. Then looking at the Saints-Texans game here, for the Saints, going to be sitting Derek Carr. Just not a ton of juice fantasy-wise. And then for the Texans, CJ Stroud, not with a great game in Week 5 fantasy-wise, but he's still been impressive through 5 weeks. I know the Saints just shut out the Patriots, but I feel like that probably has more to do with the Patriots than it does with the Saints. Not saying they're a bad defense or anything, but the Patriots are just in shambles at this point. So I still think you can fire up CJ Stroud as like a fringe option. Obviously, if you do that, you're hoping that Tank Dell gets healthy from the concussion he suffered. Next up is going to be the Colts taking on the Jaguars. Unfortunate news with Anthony Richardson expected to miss some time with a shoulder injury. They're going to pivot to Gardner Minshew. Not someone I want to be starting for fantasy football. For the Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence hasn't exactly been lighting up the fantasy point stat sheet, but in terms of real-life NFL, he's playing at a very, very high level. So I do think those points are going to come. I do think those big touchdown games are going to come. Solid matchup here going up against the Colts. So I still view Trevor Lawrence as a start moving forward. Then we're going to have the Panthers taking on the Dolphins. A pretty clear sit and a pretty clear start. You don't want to go anywhere near Bryce Young for fantasy. Honestly, even in Superflex, he might not be startable at this point. Then for the Dolphins, you just continue to ride this offense. You start Tua as your QB1. Rough quarterback matchup in the Patriots Raiders matchup. We got Mac Jones, the current Patriots quarterback, going up against the former Patriots quarterback, Jimmy G. Mac has looked rough over the last few weeks. He doesn't have a ton of help around him. This offense just seems broken. For the Raiders here, Jimmy G, just really not someone you want to be relying on for fantasy. This could be a gross one between these two teams. Next up is going to be the Lions taking on the Buccaneers, and I actually have both of these quarterbacks listed as fringe options. Jared Goff has been very impressive to start off the season, and I think this could kind of come down to Amon-Ra's health. If Amon-Ra is fully good to go, like not limited, game time decision, whatever, I think you could bump up Jared Goff to be a starting option. But without Amon-Ra, he's more of a fringe option. If Amon-Ra seems to be limited or on a snap count, I'd also probably just keep Jared Goff as a fringe play. On the other side for the Buccaneers, Baker has been impressive. He's strung together some nice games. He has like 3 out of 4 starts with solid fantasy production. He has a pretty decent matchup here against the Lions, so I do think he's one of those waiver wire guys who could potentially replace like a Richardson or a Love for this week. Then moving over to the Cardinals Rams matchup, going to be sitting Josh Dobbs, kind of came back down to earth in Week 5. For the Rams, I liked what we saw out of this passing attack with Cooper Kupp back. Both Kupp and Puka were super involved. I really like this matchup here against the Cardinals. I think this could be a big day out of Matthew Stafford, which is why I have him listed as a start. Moving over to the Eagles-Jets matchup, very clear start and a very clear sit. You fire up Jalen Hurts as a high-end QB1 every single week, regardless of matchup, and then you sit Zach Wilson, also kind of regardless of matchup at this point. Then on Sunday Night Football, Giants taking on the Bills. I'm sure everyone is hyped to see another Daniel Jones primetime game where the defense just annihilates his offensive line. Definitely can't start Daniel Jones at this point, especially in a tough matchup. On the other side for the Bills, you lock in Josh Allen as a high-end QB1. And then the final game of the week, Cowboys taking on the Chargers. Dak really has not been great to start off this season. I do think he could have a bounce back here against the Chargers. I have him as a fringe option for the Chargers. Even with Justin Herbert dealing with the finger injury, he's coming off the bye week. He's going to be a locked-in start even with that finger problem. He's playing at a very high level, so I like him here as a locked-in QB1. And that's going to be every single Week 6 matchup. If you guys enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. If you want to check out the other start-sit videos, those will all be up at some time today. The running backs and wide receivers are for sure out at this point. Tight ends may not be out yet, but they will be at some point today. Thank you all for tuning in, and I will see you in the next one.